The Big Ben screamed with its bells, and at 6 o'clock the coachman arrived to pick us up at the docks, and the sun was beginning to dip down into the horizon, creating the sky into a purple and orange sunset haze. We embarked away from the city and rode a carriage back to our house. "Master carriage driver, might you inquire a ride home for us at your own convenience?" my father asked. As me and my father rode in the black carriage, I smiled looking out the glass window, watching the city of London rolling by through my pupils. I looked at my father, who was staring out the left window, in which I depicted the harbor with giants mooring in the ocean water. Seagulls fluttering high where the flaps of sails blew restlessly in the wind. His tangled gray hair blew slightly from the breeze that generated into the carriage room. Inside the carriage room we were seated upon the nestle of red velvet, which cushioned us nicely. I watched his eyes as I took off my triangular hat and tugged in my ponytail, which trailed down past my shoulder. My father sipped on coffee as he slid it on a small blue plate. He stared out through the window as the ships and sailors passed by. Then the other carriages being pulled by giant brown horses with glass noses of fat meat. My father's gray, stormy, cloudy eyes held such a mystery in them, my own curiosity was scared to ask certain things about him. I had no clue why I was afraid to ask such questions, and it was quite silly indeed to be feared of your father and what acts he possibly committed before I was brought into this world. But I was curious enough to brave and ask. His black cloak was draped over his shoulders to his sides, and his pilgrim hat that was made from black leather from the finest of horses from Spain, black mares that roamed freely in the fields of Barcelona, and the finest of silver, as if it was produced in the forms of silverware for the queen, was wrapped around the center and finished and fastened with a man's polish of a silver buckle at the front. His hands were rough and beaten from work, calloused over multiple times. His beard was like a bush that had lost its resources, gray and white, that puffed around his face and jutted from his chin like a spear. My father was a man of mystery. There was so much I still wanted to ask the man. We passed through a shipyard, the carriage taking a turn on a left street and heading past the golden tower of Big Ben that echoed a bell throughout the city like angels hyping their gospels. We rode over a bridge that traveled over a river of brown and swishing past the Tower of London, which stood like a dark castle, where I've heard such stories of dark torture, with the rack, where a man's limbs are ripped and racked from his sockets, the Iron Maiden, a man enclosed in a bed of spikes, to make you leak 1,000 holes of crimson, rat torture, where a wax candle enclosed in a lantern is placed on your belly, releasing the rodent into the man's belly to escape the light, and the saw, where a man is hung upside down and sewn through his flesh and sinews to his anus, until he bleeds into his lips. I shivered at the thought of death. "Does something ail you, boy?" my father asked me, seeing my frightened face and thought. "What? Oh, no, my apologies, father, I looked out the window to see tonguers cutting up blue whale flesh on the London beaches. The giant mammals, full of green plankton and blubbering blue fat, was turning the sand into a red carpet, and their fat dorsal fins, the size of 4 men laying down beside it, was lying silent on the dunes. Its soulless black charcoal eyes stared back at me up to the carriage windows as I peered and watched the sailors take butcher's cleavers and slice off the belly of its whale, its oil, white, slimy fat, and dark blood run out of its side, and then its rib cages, the size of a ship, poking out, and its spleen the length of a 40-foot rope piling out. Looking at the blue whales being chopped up, it is truly an awful sight. "What do you know of marinery?" he asked. "The whales being sliced is sad, father. They too are creatures of great awe." My father thought for a minute as we rolled past the beaches by a cathedral with peasants flocking in, then bursting into the green pasture of the countryside. "Very great creatures, yes. Although we need their fat to make oil for the ships, to sail and light our lanterns so we can see in the dark. I am sure the creatures understand our intent." I disagreed, but kept that thought to myself. I then thought to ask another question that was risky. "Have you heard from your brother Arthur in the time?" I asked slowly. My father froze in place for a mere second and then slowly followed his gray eyes into mine. "What are you asking, boy?" His tone was a little sharp. "I'm really asking, father, that perhaps your brother, my uncle Arthur, could possibly aid for his help with the farm. You didn't make these investments. The crops are wilting," I added. My father sparked a nasty look at me. How dare you bring the common talk of my brother into this conversation? You know I have not spoken to him in 30 years. I like to keep it that way. Why do you hate him so? We disagreed on a lot of things. It is not for discussion at this moment. Why? Surely I deserve to know of my uncle and his exploits, I muttered. Damn your curiosity, boy! Don't you know a cockerel from a pigeon? How do you do not understand the gravity of this matter in which we are speaking? My brother is not up for discussion, in which this matter is not in session. His insult hurt, but I continued to ask. I felt I had a right to know this information. If I may be so bold to ask, I do quite understand your anger, father. Why do you disagree? What has uncle done to you? My father looked like he was going to swell into a bloodied explosion of guts, like his face was going to pop off. The last I saw of your uncle, my disgusting brother, was he forsake our lineage and name. He removed his title from Hearthstone to Courtney, and disrespected our great-great-grandfather Sir Grayson Hearthstone, who fought in the Crusades in the 1470s. You know well that a great-great-grandfather was a knight of the Templar Order, who fought the Arabs in Jerusalem. He defended the city against 300 Moorish invaders, and some say he drank from the Holy Cup, the Holy Grail, and met Christ. Although that is what my father, John, told me, in which he said his father, William the Great, told him. Passed down in legend. Well, that is not my brother, of this notion, son. He is a son of a bitch that dwells in the trenches of Stench. He had a son, a bastard named Mallory, and they left England for Africa in search of gold. I do not care to know where he is or whether if he is dead. When my father said dead, he winced a bit in pain and worry. But father, but nothing. Francis, I... God damn you, son! How dare you address your father by his name, damn it! I think I was raising a little puny cocksucking child and a man. Will you not speak of this devilry again, you hear me? Silence! I said nothing and stared out of the window for the rest of the carriage ride.